Hi, I'm Rob Bogue, and welcome to this presentation, which is titled Everything You Know Might Be Wrong. And the truth is, we all share this condition, this human condition, that we believe reality. We believe what our perception has told us reality is. And my hope is that at the end of this presentation, you'll be a little more suspicious about what you think you know. And when I started titling this, I was thinking about the Weird Al song, Everything You Know Is Wrong. And up is down, left is right. And in that song, we recognize that what we are thinking, what we believe to be correct, may or may not be. If I can get you to understand that our perceptions aren't exactly reality, well then you will be able to question what you see and hear, just like I can question what I see and hear, and more importantly, what I know. The core of this is the issue of trust. We trust that what we know is truth and reality. And, well, the reality is that what our perception is, what we know, isn't exactly right. So our goal is to figure out, how do we be more suspicious with what we're doing? How do we be more suspicious in our conversations so that we can look to find the real truth, one that combines multiple perspectives? Mark Twain said something, and yes, it's got ain't in it, so it's not very good English, but it ain't what you know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that ain't so. This is the stuff that you think you know, but it really isn't real. And I run into this several times in my career and in my life where I thought that something was green or purple or blue, and it turned out to be none of those. It turned out to be something completely different. So I want to start with ice cream. And this story is very near and dear to me because the person that I'm talking about is very near and dear to me. But think about this for a second. Okay, so she remembers her father taking her to ice cream every single night. Now, every night, always, never, those are the kinds of things you have to say, this is an interesting thing. It's a perk your ears up and listen more carefully, right? Her father died when she was 3. So that's not nice. It's a very wonderful story that how great her father is. But then you have to look back and say, well, memories can't be formed until about after the age of 2. Literally, our brains change, our chemistry, our wiring, the way that our brains work change so that we can only really remember things after that change occurs. And that change typically occurs around 2. So does she really remember the ice cream every night? Does she remember correctly? The thing is that in this case, she heard the stories about how she got taken to ice cream every single night. And whether she did or she didn't is not really the point. The real point is that those stories became real. That whether they were truth or they were fiction, they've become real to her. Now, here, I want to help you to understand that your memory is not a video recorder. And I think that sometimes we think that we remember things accurately, like we have this vivid picture of an incident or an accident or something that happened. But the funny thing is if you try and drill into that and you try and see the license plate number on the car, or you try to do something that's more detailed, you realize you don't actually see that and you can't even get there. So I'm going to show you something. It's a 10-second clip, and I want you to just pay as much attention as you possibly can, because I want to ask you some questions after you see the video. Ready? All right, that's it. 10 seconds. That's all that was. And I'm going to ask you to remember these things, or come up with the answers to these things. First of all, how many cars were there in this clip? How many cars were involved? Well, the answer, if you count non-parked cars, all the cars that were on the road traveling, not the ones in the parking lot off to the side, was that there were 5. All right, well, what's the next question? Who had the right of way? In that clip, in the clip that you just saw, who had the right of way? Was it the cars that we were traveling with, or was it the opposing car? Well, according to what we saw, the light was actually green. So the people that we were riding along with, per se, were the ones who had the right of way. How many cars were involved in the accident? Here, we don't really know, but we can see visibly in the clip that we saw, there were 3 cars in the accident that were visible. Here's fun. What color was the car that was struck? Certainly it wasn't purple, but what color was it? Well, as it turns out, it was black. What was the brand? What was the make or model of the brand that was the car that was struck? What was that? Well, it was a Volkswagen. So what was the name of the cross street? Now here's the thing. I think everybody probably thinks that you could tell what the name of the cross street was. If you thought about it, you're like, oh, I could probably get to it if I could really pay attention. In fact, it was so blurry in the video that even when I freeze framed it and I stopped right there, I couldn't figure out what the name of the cross street was. But if I had asked you to walk back through this video, to think in your mind, you would see that cross street. But you wouldn't be able to name it. You wouldn't be able to peer into it and figure out what was it that was actually the name of that cross street. And I say this because our minds are not video recorders. Even in this 10-second clip where I keyed you in and said, hey, pay attention. Activate your reticular activating system. That's the thing that allows you to pay attention. I want you to activate that, and I want you to pay all the attention you possibly can. And we still probably missed 2 or 3 or 4 of these questions. And that's normal. If I hadn't gone back and reviewed the video, I wouldn't have seen it either. The next thing to consider when we're looking at memories is if memories don't fit, we discard them. And so anything that doesn't fit with our point of view, with the thing that we preconceive, we'll get rid of. So if we walk up to Jane and she's doing some sort of good deed, Mother Teresa kind of good deed, if we do that, but we think ill of that person, we won't actually see their good deeds. It'll literally get blocked from our vision and our perception and our ability to retain it. And what happens if the thing that doesn't fit is someone talking about us, saying something about us that doesn't fit our self-image or damages our ego or makes us feel bad? Well, our ego comes well armed. I have a big, thick red book, 700 and some odd pages, about the ego and its defenses. There are 22 major defenses. These are the things that are really easy for us to use and are very useful all the time. And then 26 minor defenses. These are the things that are a little less sizable in their defense. And I didn't put these all up on the screen so that you can memorize them all. In fact, I haven't. My point was that when we have things that don't fit us, don't fit our perception of the world, we are well armed to ignore that. Let me change pace for a moment and ask you, would you steal a sandwich? And no, I mean really, like, would you steal a sandwich? I can tell you for me, the answer is yes. Now, it isn't my normal behavior. It isn't the thing that I would aspire to. It doesn't fit my morals and values. But, you know what? If my family is starving, if I can't feed them, if I can't find any way possible to feed them, would I steal a sandwich? Yeah, I would. I'm not proud of it, but I would. You see, this guy by the name of Kurt Levine, and it's spelled Lewin, so it's really hard to figure out, but it's Levine. That's the way he pronounces it. And I think his mother pronounced it that way too. What he says is behavior, what we do, is a function of both the person, and here he probably means character, the kind of person we want to be, or values, and the environment, or the situation, right? What he's saying is that if you want to figure out if somebody will steal a sandwich or not, you have to consider both the person and the environment, right? The problem with this is that we tend to believe that people are either good or they're bad. But we're not very good at believing that people are both good and bad. That doesn't really fit our model. We tend to think one or the other because it's easier. We can put people in a bucket and we don't have to think any more about it. And this leads to our fundamental attribution error. And what this says is that when we're looking at our own negative behaviors, the things that we've done that we are not happy about, we tend to excuse them based on the environment and retain our goodness. We are still good people. When we look at other people, we tend to see the fundamental attributes of them negatively. We tend to evaluate their negative behaviors from the point of view of their character, of their personhood, of who they are. And that's the fundamental attribution error, and that's what everybody does. It's built into our humanity. And we have to fight against it. You see, the thing is that there's good and bad inside of everyone. This yin-yang symbol, or Taoist symbol, this symbol really leads to they exist together. And at the root of good is evil, and at the root of evil is good. So we can't just say this person is a bad person, and therefore we don't want to deal with them, or that they must have done it. We have to look beyond that and look at the situation and say, yeah, this makes sense. There is evidence to support that. Or there's no evidence. So next I need to convince you that you're partially blind. And for this, there's an exercise. I'm going to put up this in a moment on the screen, and I want you to walk through this exercise with me. If for some reason, where you're viewing the screen or whatever, it doesn't work for you, I would ask that you hit the link that's below this video, and I'm going to ask you to look at that page and get it to the point where you can run this exercise with us. So here's the thing. On this image, you see two letters. You see an R and an L. That is for your right or left eye, and that's going to be the eye that's open. What I want you to do is close one of your eyes, and whichever eye is left, or is still open, not left, whichever eye is open, I want you to look at that letter for that. And I want you to start, if you're using a piece of paper, start at an arm's length out and bring it in slowly. Keep your focus on the letter. And what I want you to notice but not look at is that the other letter disappears. Okay, so at this point, if you haven't been able to do that, I'm going to ask that you pause this video and try to figure out if you can make this appear. You have to stay very focused. You cannot move your eye. But you have to become aware of when the other letter disappears. So I'm going to pause for just one more moment. Okay, so hopefully you were able to see that. And what's important to me about this, and the reason that we stopped and did this exercise, is because it demonstrates that we fabricate things. So we are all blind in each eye where the optic nerve attaches to the retina. There's just no space left for visual sensation. And so if you can put something in that spot, then magically things will disappear. So what we did is we tricked your eye into putting the other letter into that spot. And when we did, your brain did something very interesting. With no other visual input, with nothing else to work on, it literally regenerated the pattern that existed on the page. So it didn't become white, it didn't become black, it didn't become a hole that you can't see in. It literally made up stuff to fill in the gap. The first time I did this, it was really spooky. Because it was like, hey, I think I saw that. But in truth, I didn't. And you didn't either. And I wanted to show you this because it shows you, it demonstrates how pervasive it is that our brain will go in and make stuff up when there's a hole in the information. All right, let's move on to some perspectives. And the first perspective I want to give you is this picture of the Mount Rushmore monument. And this is from the visitor center. This is from the ground near it, from the bottom. And they're huge, right? Like literally the faces are 60 feet tall. So we feel that this monument is absolutely huge, right? If you were to ask the folks out in Rapid City, South Dakota, in that general area in Keystone where this monument is, you say, hey, are they big or not? And they're going to say the faces, that's what they're called, are big. But let me change your perspective. And I'm going to change your perspective. What I'm doing here is I'm going in the air, and I'm taking a picture of the same monument, and I'm putting it in context for you. I'm putting it, it's on the end of a little mountain range, in the middle of a whole bunch of other mountains, and on and on and on and on. And so now, suddenly, Mount Rushmore doesn't seem as large. Now, suddenly, Mount Rushmore is smaller. Are they still literally the same 60 feet high? Yes, they are. But your perspective, if this was the only photo I ever showed you of Mount Rushmore, would be not as massive. Okay, so we've been working on the idea that your current understanding is flawed, but what about history? What about the things that we know from the past? And so the thing is, the victor gets to write the history. The person who loses the war doesn't get to write the history, because if the Civil War had been won by the South, it would not be the Civil War at all. It would be called the War of Northern Aggression. And if you don't believe me, the next time you travel south of the Mason-Dixon line, ask someone about the Civil War, and you may get corrected. And you may get told about the War of Northern Aggression. Now, by the way, it's a little ironic because Fort Sumner, which was a Northern Union fort, was attacked by the South. So it's a little bit of history on their end. But the point is the perspectives very much differ. And we, in the North, in the Union, managed to write history, and so it's called the Civil War. Now, everybody, more or less, agrees that the cause of the war was slavery, but where it gets funny, where it gets difficult, is things like, was it because of ideological reasons? Was it economic reasons? Political? When Lincoln won, he won with such a majority, and he brought in a bunch more of his party into Congress. The South literally feared that slaves would be freed and that their political interests wouldn't be held. And so, is it a political issue? Was it a social issue? Was it a statement about the fact that slavery is bad? If we believe that all men are created equal, then why is a black man only 3/5 the weight of a white man? This was written originally into the Constitution. So the thing is, the cause of the Civil War may have been slavery, but we don't even know why. We don't even really know what the root of it is. The other thing I'll say is that we believe that Lincoln freed the slaves, the Emancipation Proclamation. But the funny thing is, that actually doesn't apply to any Union state, to anyone in the United States. It actually only applied to those states which had succeeded. So it was mainly puffery. It was mainly, well, if you guys come back, all you slaves, you will no longer be slaves, you'll be free, right? He didn't change anything in the states because he couldn't, he didn't have the power, but in the war powers, he could say, if you've succeeded, I'm freeing all of your slaves. Pretty powerful, but not the way we remember it for most of us. Well, how about the earth? Is it flat? Well, okay, so we know it's not flat now, but was that because in 1492 Columbus sailed the ocean blue? Well, no, actually, though many folks who've been through the education system in the United States believe that Columbus was the first person to figure out that the earth was round and not flat, the reality is about 500 BC, Pythagoras, that guy that's got that theorem, he figured out that the earth had to be round because the lunar eclipses, the shadows, were rounded. And by about 200 BC, Erasmusens measured the size of the earth to within about 3%. Columbus chose to believe that the earth was about a third smaller than it actually is and thought he could find a shorter route by going the long way. Right? So the earth, until you got to 500 BC, was flat. 200 BC, we didn't know how much. And 1500, we were still making mistakes about its size. We think things that may not be true. And in fact, people thought the earth was flat for a long time after we knew it wasn't. And conversely, we think that folks like Christopher Columbus were the first guy to figure out that the earth isn't flat, and that was an accident. What about guys like Andrew Carnegie? Andrew Carnegie was not exactly well revered in his time. In his time, he was called a robber baron. He was somebody who was oppressing the little people, the people that worked for him. He was a steel industry tycoon and made a lot of money. He was also a philanthropist. And most folks today don't remember the robber baron Andrew Carnegie. What they remember is the Andrew Carnegie that supported 3,000 public libraries. That's how we remember him. That's revision, right? That isn't who he really was. It's a view of who he was that may or may not reflect reality. And in truth, as I said with good and bad, he probably was a little bit of both. Well, what about you? Let's make this a little more personal. What if you were to encounter a schoolyard pal somewhere on the street? Somebody you hadn't seen in 20 years, 30 years. Okay, I'll stop there. If somebody you've not seen in a long time, even if they stole your girlfriend or they bullied you on the playground or whatever, the reality is the connection you have with them across time has a tendency to create affinity. In other words, you'll like them more. You'll like them more because of that connection. You're revising history when you bring this up. When you think about that person, you will revise history to think, oh, they couldn't have been that bad. We were both kids. It's not that big a deal. So you're willing to revise history about your schoolyard pals just because it's a long connection to the distant past. We all see a distorted reality. We don't see reality from the point of view of a perfect mirror. We see it in mirrored balloons and other things which distort the images that we see. We only see our perspective. It's always distorted. In fact, one of the ways that things can become distorted are these things called boxes. Now, this comes from a book called The Anatomy of Peace by the Arminger Institute, and it talks about these boxes that once we get in them, it further distorts reality, and it makes it hard for us to interact with other people. In fact, we want to pull them into boxes and get them to be defensive and disruptive as well. The better than box means I'm better than everyone else. The I deserve box, that's the entitled box, and we think of a lot of millennials in this box, whether that's accurate or not. There's the must be seen as box. In other words, yes, I have flaws and things in my life, but I can't share those with other people because I don't want them to know. There's a worse than box. This is Eeyore. This is, oh, well. And this is a person who thinks that they are not good enough. They are not worthy. And all of these boxes are fake. All of these are not real. They're a perception. And I'm going to move into a close with this ladder of inference. And this is Chris Argyris' work. And he's formerly out of Harvard. And the idea is that we form conclusions and then we don't test them. So we take observable data and experiences. Then we select the data we want from that. We apply meaning to that. And then we make assumptions based on the meaning. Then we draw conclusions. We adopt beliefs about the world. And finally, we'll take actions on our beliefs. So if we walk through this, if I'm in a park, I can notice a man in a sleeping bag on a park bench. I can apply meaning that he is a homeless man. I can then make assumptions that he wants to be homeless. From that, I can draw conclusions like we're not helping out our homeless people. We don't have a good way of taking care of homeless people. And from that, I will adopt beliefs that we're a bad city or that something needs to change. And I will take actions based on my beliefs. I might go walk up and hand the guy a $20 bill. As it turns out, maybe he was part of a Cub Scout or a Boy Scout thing, and his tent was wet, so he decided to sleep on a park bench. I don't really know because I didn't test any of my assumptions. I didn't test my walk up this ladder of inference. And that's what we have to do when we're interacting with folks. We need to think about what are the conclusions we're drawing, what are the beliefs that we're figuring out, what are we assigning to this observation that we have, and what did we miss in the broader context? Did we miss all of the Boy Scout tents that are littered across the lawn behind us? The thing is, all of what we believe has some kernel of truth. There's somewhere something is at least a little right. And so how do we figure out what we added to something and what was there to begin with? I'm going to end with this, just a quick set of words, and I want you to understand that even our language, even our words, really doesn't accurately convey reality. So if I were to say staff, what do I mean? Well, I might mean a stick, I might mean employees, or I might mean an infection. If I were to talk about died, you might think about dead or colored. Organ, I could be thinking about a musical instrument or part of the body. Seal, I could be talking about a marine mammal or a artist, and on and on and on. So dust, am I putting dust on it or am I pulling it away? Weather, did it become weathered by having the weather beating up against it? Am I in strike? Am I in baseball? Or am I a work situation where they're on strike? Like, there's all of these things that where we assume meanings to words that may or may not be there. So, in summary, we cannot be sure that we or others remember everything as it happened, that we didn't miss or omit an important detail, we didn't misinterpret or distort what we saw, we didn't reach wrong conclusions, or that we even knew what others meant. Reagan's favorite saying, which I think Gorbachev may have regretted ever saying to him, is trust but verify. And it's an old Russian proverb. And it's, we want to trust other people. We need to trust other people. But we need to figure out how we can verify what they know and what we know so that we can figure out what we know that might be wrong. Thank you.